The old house in Kyoto was a dream come true, or so I thought. I'd moved to Japan to teach English, and this traditional machiya with its paper screens and tatami mat rooms seemed like the perfect way to immerse myself in the culture. The landlord, a stooped, elderly man named Mr. Tanaka, had given me a deep bow and a key that looked ancient. He mentioned the house had been in his family for generations, and that it had history. I just smiled, thinking he meant it was old. I had no idea what kind of history he was talking about. The first few weeks were blissful. I loved the smell of old wood and incense, the way the light filtered through the shoshi screens in the morning. But then, the whispers started. They were faint at first, like the rustling of leaves or the sighing of the wind. I'd be grading papers at my low wooden table, and I'd hear it a soft, sibilant sound from beneath the floorboards. I'd pause, listen, and hear nothing but the creaks and groans of an old house settling. I brushed it off as my imagination. A new country, a new home. I was bound to feel a little on edge. But the whispers grew louder, more distinct. They weren't in English, or even Japanese. It was a language I couldn't place, guttural and ancient. A string of hushed, urgent sounds that seemed to coil up from the very earth beneath the house. They were most active at night, when the city quieted down and the only sounds were the distant chime of a temple bell and my own ragged breathing. One night, the whispering was so intense I couldn't sleep. It sounded like dozens of voices, all murmuring at once, their words overlapping into a chilling chorus. I finally got up, my heart pounding against my ribs, and pressed my ear to the floor of the main tatami room. The wood was cold against my cheek, and the sound, it was clearer now. It wasn't just whispers, it was a story, a lament, a plea. I couldn't understand the words, but the emotion was universal, profound, unending sorrow. I started doing some research. I spent my weekends in the local library, digging through dusty archives about the neighborhood. I learned that centuries ago, this area had been on the outskirts of the city. It was a place where the unwanted were left, the sick, the poor, the outcast. There were tales of a long, brutal famine where families had to make impossible choices. The stories were vague, filled with euphemisms, but the underlying horror was clear. Back in the house, things escalated. Small objects would move. A teacup left on the table would be on the floor the next morning, unbroken. A book would be opened to a different page. It was subtle, never overtly threatening, but deeply unsettling. The house felt occupied, crowded with unseen presences. I started feeling watched, especially in the main room. The air would grow heavy and cold, and the whispers would rise from the floor, swirling around me. I tried to ignore it. I burned sage. I left out offerings of rice and water. I even tried talking to them, asking them what they wanted. But the whispers just continued their mournful, ceaseless story. I was losing sleep, my work was suffering, and the charming old house had become a prison of fear. One evening, I found an old, loose floorboard near the tokonoma alcove. My curiosity finally outweighed my terror. Using a butter knife from the kitchen, I pried it up. The smell that hit me was of damp earth and decay, and something else. Something faintly sweet and cloying. I shone my phone's flashlight into the darkness below. The space beneath the house wasn't just dirt. It was a shallow crawl space, but it was littered with small, dark shapes. It took my mind a moment to process what I was seeing. They were bones. Small bones. Dozens, maybe hundreds of them, piled and scattered in the dirt. And among the bones were other things. Tiny, worn wooden dolls, scraps of faded silk, and small, smooth stones arranged in circles. A wave of nausea and understanding washed over me. These weren't just any bones, they were the bones of children, Mizuko, the water children, unborn or infant children who had passed away, during the famine, during times of hardship. This was where they were laid to rest, not buried properly, but hidden away beneath the floor, their existence a secret shame and sorrow. The whispers rose again, louder than ever before, swirling up from the opening in the floor. But now, I didn't hear them as a threat, I heard them as a plea. They weren't trying to scare me, they were trying to be heard. They were telling their story. The story of the forgotten, the unmourned. All this time, they had just wanted someone to know they were here, to acknowledge their brief, tragic lives. I didn't move back to the tatami room. I couldn't. I gently replaced the floorboard, my hands shaking. The next day, I found a local temple and spoke to a priest, my voice trembling as I explained what I had found. He wasn't surprised. He listened with a deep, sad compassion. He told me he would come to the house, that he would perform the Mizuko Cao, a ceremony to guide the souls of the children and bring peace to them, and to their grieving parents from long ago. The ceremony was quiet and beautiful. The priest chanted, smoke from the incense coiling towards the ceiling. He offered prayers for the small souls who had been trapped for so long in sorrow and silence. As he finished, a profound stillness settled over the house. The air, which had been so heavy and cold for months, suddenly felt light. For the first time since those first few weeks, the house felt empty. It felt like home again. That night, I slept in the main room. I lay on my futon, listening. There was nothing, no rustling, no murmuring, just the gentle, peaceful silence of an old house at rest. The whispers beneath the floorboards were finally gone. Their story had been heard, and they could finally be at peace. I stayed in that house for the rest of my year in Japan, and I never heard them again. But I never forgot them. Sometimes, you don't need to understand the words to understand the story. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. Stay safe out there.